watching Morning at NTV.
Good morning and welcome back to Morning at NTV. My name is Idris Matusegawa, and right now we are getting into a conversation that I would say is trending #1 in Uganda today, and that is the fuel price going up and up and up each day. In studio, I have Bosco Habomugisha, the General Manager, National Pipeline, to talk about what's happening, what's the way forward, is there hope? JB, good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
First, tell us about National Pipeline. What do you do? What's your mandate as a company?
Thank you. The National Pipeline Company is a wholly owned subsidiary of UNOC, the Uganda National Oil Company.
Yes.
Now, the National Pipeline Company deals with infrastructure development for oil and gas in terms of pipelines, storage terminals, and we also handle downstream commercial aspects.
Yes.
Downstream meaning the supply, sale, and distribution of petroleum products. So it's a component of UNOC that is dealing with infrastructure and commercial aspects in those areas.
Definitely, you're the right person to talk about this. First question,
Yes.
How much did you buy your fuel getting here today?
Now, you are right, the prices have been moving up. Petrol is going into the 5,000, in some areas slightly higher. Diesel has been also going up similarly. And the challenges are occasioned by a number of factors, because petroleum must move from sources of production through a logistics process, through the high seas, through pipelines, through rail, through the road. By the time it reaches us, there are cost add-ons. Now, should there be any hiccup in that logistics process, then you have additional challenges. And the normal economics of supply and demand then kick in. If you have a constraint on supply and your demand, as a country, our market is growing. Demand is growing. If you have a constraint on supply, then you have a higher demand and less supply, and naturally prices
Go up.
Yes.
What are some of the options for transporting the oil from where we get it from?
Yes, there are about, I can speak about 3. You can, for the high seas, you have an option. You have to move using vessels on the high seas when you are importing. Now, when you arrive at the shores, at the coast, let's say Mombasa in this case, you have options of rail, you have road, and you have pipelines. Now, for the case of Uganda, the main supply from Mombasa to Western Kenya is the Kenya pipeline system. Interestingly, pipelines, because they move bulk, they still remain the cheapest way of transporting petroleum. Of course, then the next is rail, because you still have more bulk. And as you reduce the bulk movement, the cost per unit increases. Now, one of the challenges we have as Uganda is that most of our volume from the Western Kenya points of Kisumu and Eldoret, the volumes that come to Uganda are coming by road. Now, by road means you are moving small pieces of a volume. We use tankers, trucks. So the cost per unit becomes an issue. Definitely, we all know that the best way to do it is to move by pipeline or by rail. And as a country, you're aware that we have been having projects around rail. That is delayed by financing. And rail, you can't develop it in isolation. It's developed in series. You have to link up to the Kenya system so that you have continuity. Now, Kenya has been working on the standard gauge railway, and Uganda will definitely have to add on once Kenya reaches the border. Similarly,
do we have an option of pipeline?
We have an option. We have been working to actually link Kampala and even up to Kigali to the Kenya pipeline system. The challenge with some of these systems are that if you have a way to produce your own petroleum, then you don't need to build these systems. So along the way, as a country, we made a decision to develop our own refinery. And so everything had to wait until our own refinery is developed. And definitely that changes the game of petroleum supply to the country if you're producing your own products. Now, these products, when you produce them locally, then you have a different pricing mechanism. But the reality again is that developing a refinery requires financing.
Yes.
You're talking about $4 billion plus. And that process has to be achieved to develop a refinery. So we are working on very many fronts. We want a refinery, and definitely if that volume from the refinery does not supply our total market plus the markets to the west of Uganda, then you look at that balance in terms of, does the additional balance required beyond the refinery, does it warrant the construction of a pipeline? If it doesn't add up to the economics of a pipeline, then you go rail, then you go road. And we are also working on water. The Kenya pipeline system is already linked to water through Kisumu. And as a country, we are working to also put more volume on the lake so that we can transport bulk on the lake, because again, bulk is about cost per unit. Through the lake to our storage in Jinja, we are working to connect Jinja storage terminal to the lake so that we can deliver bulk through the lake using barges.
Yes.
That will reduce our cost per unit. It will also enhance effectiveness of supply. And that's the current status. But we are also saying, let's have additional storage in Kampala. And we are working on a terminal to the west of Kampala to ensure that as the economy grows, we have additional storage capacity. Yes.
You've mentioned that the safest and probably the cheapest way to transport fuel is either pipeline or railway.
Yes.
And back in 2016, the SGR project was launched off.
Yes.
And now, 5 years down the road, we have seen Kenya build their SGR from Mombasa to Nairobi.
Right.
But we have not started here in Uganda. And the pipeline, all these plans that you've been talking about, creating a pipeline, using sea water, are in process, are always in process. What's stopping us from acting fast? What's the problem?
No, all these projects, they are informed by a number of factors.
Yeah.
Now, talking about standard gauge railway, like I mentioned, you will not build standard gauge railway system in Uganda that is not fully linked to the one in Kenya.
Yeah.
And the one in Kenya must approach our border for us to be able to link to the Kenyan system. Otherwise, then you have no continuity. You wouldn't have a system running from Mombasa to Uganda without Kenya reaching the border.
So are we saying that we are waiting for Kenya to reach the border, then we start?
Kenya must reach the border. Otherwise, you can't build a system here.
JB, isn't that a poor way of doing things? Because
How
I'm
else are you going to do
imagining
it?
if we have a plan in place and we know that this is the route that we are going to take. I'll give an example. When you are building a road from here to Mbara, and you know that this road is going to take this line, what stops you from starting Mbara? You can start constructing the road, and from Kampala you can start, then meet on the way.
There's a reality that you're forgetting about sovereignty.
Yeah.
If you're doing things in your state, that's different.
Yes.
But if you're building a standard gauge railway system in Uganda, and Kenya is building its system, you have no guarantees that Kenya will reach the border. So you might build the famous white elephant.
Yeah.
Because how else are you going to use it? Sovereignty, if Kenya has other areas of investment and they don't build their system to your border, you have a white elephant. It will be beautiful in your face, but you cannot use it.
JB, again, I'll ask, and this is just to understand, because when I look at the plans for the SGR,
Right.
Uganda is very key, because when you look at the lines, you go through Tororo, you go through Mbale,
Right.
Gulu, Pakwach to Juba, then one going through Mbara to Kigali. should we only construct the railway, because it does not only transport
Correct.
goods but also people,
Right.
and transport is one of the factors that propels development in
Right.
the country.
Absolutely.
So isn't the railway so important that we should have had it by now?
I can say yes,
Yeah.
but again, that's a discussion with the people of,
Yes.
of the railway system. But from the fuel perspective,
Yeah.
our key drivers in terms of lowering the cost of supplying our country, you're right, you start with pipelines because the cost per unit is lower there. The next is rail, then you go into water, then you go into road.
Yeah.
Now, SGR, we all need it. But logistically, until you have Kenya reaching the border, you cannot really invest in SGR because you will not use it. But we need it, and you can have that discussion with the people of rail.
Definitely. I just wanted to bring it up because
Yeah.
you mentioned that transportation
Yes.
is very important. And the
Absolutely.
cheapest is pipeline
Then
or
rail.
railway.
Yes.
And pipeline is only limited to fuel, but railway can actually also serve passengers.
Various.
And when you look at the situation that we are in right now, just a year ago, 2 years ago, in the early stages of the pandemic, we were having issues. We couldn't transport goods because, again, you had to follow the SOPs, drivers had to be checked. The same issue that brought problems before is the same issue bringing problems now. Shouldn't we look at a solution that is going to permanently or long-term provide a solution to this? Shouldn't the government be investing money into you guys so that you do your job easier?
I entirely agree with you. It's just that, again, when you think about government, the priorities are many, and then the basket, the financing basket is limited, and then you realize that if you have 3-4 priorities, then others are scaled down,
Yes.
not because they are less important. So for now, what we are pushing to enhance supply is the lake, because there we know that our financing requirements are not very high. The lake will help us to ease in the short term some of the constraints, not to take them away. Then we'll have to assess how quickly can we have our refinery in place. The refinery will solve many things. Will supply our economy. We can also be able to supply our neighbors. But again, these projects which require large capital outlay have their constraints. They take time. A refinery that needs over 3 billion, 4 billion US dollars that is not coming from our economy is a process that takes time.
What
But
are
there is
what are some
progress.
of the timelines?
But there is progress. We have finished the front-end engineering designs.
Yes.
Environmental studies have been done. We are looking to this year and the next year to fully define the issues of financing so that we are clear on how are we financing the refinery. Because until you answer that question, then you have a constraint. But during this year, that question should be answered, and then we look to attracting other investors in the refinery.
Okay.
And as I mentioned, the issues around infrastructure continue, because the refinery must be linked to the main market, which is Kampala.
Yeah.
And if we assess that volumes to the west also have good economics for a pipeline, we extend the pipeline to the west towards Mbarara. So definitely there is work to do. These challenges we face regularly, almost every year, cannot continue like this when we know the answers. So we have informed the Ministry of Energy, we have informed the Cabinet, and the key element, they have all understood. The key issue is financing. How do you finance these developments?
Yeah. And I know I'm putting you on the spot here, and probably
And it is appropriate. It is appropriate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because clearly, so many businesses and the country runs on fuel.
Absolutely.
So if we can't access fuel, it's a problem. And it's just mind-boggling to realize that this is not treated as a priority or as urgently as it should be. You talked about reserves. What are some of the reserves that we have in the country?
Now, you know, in the old days, fuel reserves in terms of storage facilities were being developed to debottleneck these challenges of supply. Now, along the way, you realize that the economy grows to a point where you must define alternatives. Definitely, ginger storage was built to enhance supply efficiency, and there were processes to build other storage facilities. Then along the way, as the economy grows, there is diversion in terms of prioritization. So in ginger, there were challenges. We had fuel reserves. Reserves are really the fuel itself. There was fuel there. Then you have challenges of how to manage reserves. You know, fuel is liquid money. How do you manage liquid money? It's very easy. Most of the time there is pilferage in terms of theft, leakage, many other factors. So the national oil company has been given this mandate: manage this storage facility. What we have asked for is for government to give us seed capital, that we should be able to get some fuel into the tanks. Our mandate would be, when there is stability in the market, we sell this fuel, get a profit margin, and go and buy more. We keep growing this volume. Because if we don't do that, then when you have a supply constraint, you will definitely suffer these short-term shocks, and they are not very comfortable. So as a national company, we have made these voices, and we have been listened to. We are hoping that during the next budget year, there can be seed capital to actually buy fuel and hold it in the tanks. Yeah, because if we don't do that, these shocks continue affecting us. When there are elections in the region, and then there's a supply constraint, fuel prices will hike because of the natural laws of supply and demand. But there is progress, and we hope that through the lake, we can also debottleneck the road, because about 95% of our supply is on the road, and that is not comfortable.
95%?
Yes, yes.
It's alarming.
Yes, so we are working
on it. It's really alarming and worrying in a way that, again, what really concerns probably the citizens of Uganda is that such issues seem to be left to grow, to pester, and 10 years, 20 years along the way, you wake up and you find yourself in a situation like we are in today.
I think it's going to get better.
What are some of the solutions that are being put in place to solve this issue very quickly?
The first solution is, we do not have a national oil company. Now we have this infrastructure in terms of a system. Now this national oil company can define, and we have really worked on that, define what it means to hold efficiently fuel reserves. Because we had fuel, but there were many challenges. We have defined what it means to start a process of building those reserves. And we have also defined what it means to enhance ginger fuel reserve through the lake. So all these mechanisms must be available for decision makers to say, yes, if we put taxpayers' money here, it will be efficiently utilized. And that's one of the key developments that is happening. The other one I mentioned is the importance of developing a refinery here. That will be transformation. And as we grow, then there is the issue of infrastructure, whether it is linking to the lake, whether we need a pipeline, and we find investors to work with us to develop this infrastructure. So we have a thinking machinery to ensure that we can improve fuel supply or availability in the country. And so I think in the next medium term, 3, 4, 5 years, if this situation remains the same, then of course there is a problem in the structuring of the current developments. But we are very optimistic that this will get better.
You know, one of the issues that we've had as a country is that we have brilliant ideas, but we never execute.
No, we are here to execute.
Well, time will tell. Is there any factors put in place to make sure that these plans are executed in the right time and in the right way? Does the company have any?
I can tell you the issue of linking ginger storage to the lake is a process that we are working on this year. In the next, this year and the next year, we must have a linkage of ginger storage to the lake. We must have additional transport on the lake. Of course, you are aware of other developments of the Mahati terminal. They also want to put barges on the lake. So the near term, in terms of enhancing fuel supply, is the lake. Now, beyond that, the next 5 years, the question of the refinery should be fully answered. And then as this economy grows, as the Western regional markets in Rwanda, in Eastern DRC, and also South Sudan, as these markets grow, then we have to answer the question of what is the extra volume that could warrant the development of a pipeline. So the next 5 years are supposed to be transformational.
Crucial.
And if we don't do that, then we are not useful to the state.
You talked about DRC. Right now, we are at war with ADF, and our military UPDF is right there. What fuel are they using? And they using our fuel? What if they run out of fuel and the tanks collapse? What's going to happen?
My brother, I'll try to answer, but not as the chief of logistics and engineering of UPDF.
Of course.
Definitely, they need fuel.
Yeah.
And when we talk about heavy equipment, you need diesel fuel. And naturally, when you talk about diesel, there is a market here. War is transitory. It also adds extra volume, but it's transitory. It will come down. So you also don't want to build stocks for a transitory situation. You just ensure that it's supplied. Now, and it's really, it's not an outright war per se, because I think ADF is more of a guerrilla operation. So it's not a heavy consumption in terms of fuel. But they are using diesel because the equipment they use is really diesel.
There has been a question that has been running through so many Ugandans. Some time back we had that when the question was put across of fuel prices are going high, can the government come in and stop these petrol stations distributors from increasing the fuel? And we were told there is a cap. There is an amount that you can't go beyond. Do you know that amount?
You see, again, I'm not sure about caps, but what I know is that when you talk about fuel, it's a whole price build-up. You start with the price of crude oil on the global market. You go into refining costs. You go into the high seas logistics of the marine process. You reach the port, you add another cost. You add the pipeline system. Then you add taxes. Then you add the transport from there to here, and you add a profit margin for the operators.
Definitely, as any business runs.
And I can assure you, because of the liberalized nature of our market, you cannot have a large profit margin and sell fuel. What they are doing right now, these price hikes are just for a short time because of supply and demand. But you cannot have a large profit margin and sell fuel in our economy because the fuel stations are many, the alternatives. And those alternatives are important to keep the price margin, rather the profit margin, low. So the prices, right now, if you said, you guys, you must sell this fuel at 3,000, then you have to tell people where to put all these costs.
So that means fuel can actually go up to 100,000 a litre.
It can, but you see, if you have effective supply, the profit margin cannot be that significant, and you sell fuel. These are games of a short transitory period, and these problems are going to go away. The borders are already being opened. You're aware that the testing has been adjusted, testing for COVID. But of course, as that happens, the key question is what you asked: how can we enhance supply systems so that these shocks don't happen? But a cap is really something. In a liberalized market, a cap is basically to say, how do we define profit for an operator? Because the other costs are just costs. unless you play with taxes, which again will affect the economy in other areas.
You talked about the lack of financial support to finance the transportation system like the pipelines and the railway. What are some of the options that, if probably government does not give priority to that project per se in the next 5 years, are you looking at other options of getting this money in to make sure that we don't actually go down a worse situation?
Yeah, actually, and it's like, you know, what we are doing in Ginger to link the terminal to the lake is not really being financed by government. We are working with an investment partner. There are many projects that once you define a project and it makes economic sense for an investor, there's no reason why you'll not get a partner. We are looking for a partner right now into Kampala storage terminal, and the economics are on the table.
Yes.
As long as an investor has seen that this project makes economic sense, you don't have to wait for government financing. Although some of these infrastructure, and that's the message we have passed on to our leadership, some of this infrastructure, you need control of the state, because it's critical that you are able to control the inputs into the economy. If you don't, then you have a profit margin into operating a terminal that could have been scaled down, and all these costs end up with the users of the transport system. So the message we are passing on is we need control. We need at least 51% participation in these developments so that we are able to control the cost inputs and therefore the profit margins as well.
Well, if you have just joined us, my name is Idris Matusegawa and this is Morning at NTV. We are talking about the hikes in fuel prices. What is causing it, and how can we make sure that we never, ever find ourselves in such a position as a country ever again? I am with Bosco Habomugisha from National Pipeline, the GM, who is telling us some of the solutions and some of the problems and a way forward. Before I let you go, JB, what are some of the options for Ugandans right now? Because people are desperate. Tensions are going high. They are going to petrol stations, buying fuel, keeping it in jerry cans. What should they do right now in such a situation?
Thank you. Two things. One, this situation we are in is highly temporary. The cause of the situation we are in is well known. We had issues around testing of COVID, and trucks accumulated.
Yes.
As we speak, trucks are being cleared day and night. So the situation is going to normalize as a situation right now. The second thing I want to mention is the worst thing you can do to yourself is to buy fuel and store it in your house. The treasure that you have in your house is your family. You really don't want your family to sleep where there is petrol. It's the worst thing you can do to your family.
Yeah.
So Ugandans, please don't store fuel in your homes. It's the worst thing you can do to your family. Fuel is too volatile. It's highly flammable. It's something that you should never, never store in your house. Sometimes even turnovers cause problems to people, even when you're using just kerosene. Now think about petrol.
Yeah.
Petrol is just a bomb in itself. You don't want it in your house. So it's a temporary situation, and it's going to go away. And as a system, we are working on medium to long-term solutions to ensure that this does not continue to happen. But I wanted to take you to another side, the side of demand. And I was thinking about this when I was coming here.
Yeah.
Uganda's fuel demand, right now we are around 6.5 or 7 million liters per day of consumption. And that number continues to grow. You have moved through our roads. We are burning a lot of fuel in traffic. And I was thinking about the young employee who is entering a job, and once they finish probation, the first thing they want to buy is a car. And they are not buying it using their money. They're using a salary loan to buy a car, and the next Saturday to buy fuel. And then you're like, how can we ease the situation of these young employees so that when they get a salary, what they need to buy is really not a car. And I was thinking about, you just need to add letter D. They need to buy a card to use a bus transport system, to use a rail transport system.
Thank you.
And you need to have a discussion. I'm just taking you to another issue of demand for fuel. You need to have a discussion with the KCCA. Because I'm made to understand that they are working on a transport system for Kampala, which I believe
hopefully it will be in fruition in the next 2 years
to other areas. But I can show you, when you look at developed countries, the solution to excessive fuel demand, we have unproductive fuel demand in that traffic. There's fuel being consumed, but not productive. We have young people who are spending money on non-productive things. Actually, liabilities. A car is not necessarily an asset. And so you need to have a discussion with the KCC on what they are doing. And on the
definitely,
system.
JB, I know there's so much to talk about, and hopefully we shall have you back here, because fuel is a very important topic. And I'm hoping you will be able to come back and we discuss more on that. But right now, we are going to cross over to Stephen Mbide,